Hey there, in this video I will demonstrate how I covered this entire 24-foot wall with a French cleat storage system. Now French cleats are a very versatile way to store your items because you can easily relocate all of these items within just a few seconds. Now I will also demonstrate how I built some of these hangers, and if you're interested in any of the tools and supplies I use in this video, I will leave a link for those in the description below. I hope you enjoy the video. Now for a quick visual of what a French cleat is, I have a piece of wood with a 45-degree edge on the top, which is the cleat, and it will be attached to the wall. I have a tool hanger with a 45-degree cleat facing down attached to the back that will sit inside of the 45-degree cleat on the wall. And then I have the tool sitting on the hanger. Now that you have a better understanding of how French cleats work, let's get started. With my wall being 24 feet long and 9 feet tall, I used 3 sheets of 3/4 inch cabinet grade pine plywood. I began at the table saw breaking down these sheets into more manageable sizes. I then set my fence to 4 inches and began ripping these down into even smaller strips. After that, I tilted my table saw blade to 45 degrees and took the 4-inch strips and ripped them in half. I repeated this process until I had over 80 French cleats. Now I wanted to make this wall useful and at the same time present a more man cave color vibe. So I took each piece to my workbench and began applying finish. I started with a pre-stained wood conditioner, followed by wiping on some wood stain with a lint-free rag, and finished with a few coats of polyurethane to provide a protective top coat. While I set all my cleats aside to dry, I decided to paint the wall. The color I used was Iron Ore by Sherwin-Williams. I applied 2 coats with a roller and took my time cutting in with a brush around the baseboard. In the end, I'm happy with how the color turned out. After the paint dried, I needed to find all the studs in the wall. To do that, I grabbed my stud finder and began marking them off one by one. Then I used my level and was able to mark a line all the way down the wall. Now that I had all the studs located, I wanted to make a template so I could speed up the process. So I transferred those marks from the wall onto a French cleat, then began drilling a hole at each mark. Now that I had my template made, I was able to place it on top of the cleats I will be applying to the wall. Now I was able to drill out all the pilot holes into each cleat with speed and efficiency. I then staged the screws into the cleats using black star drive deck screws. After all the prep work was completed, it was time to start applying the cleats to the wall. For spacing, I used my 6-foot level and just started going to town fastening the screws into the studs one after another, until I got to my first stopping point, which were the electrical outlets. Now to make the outlets blend nice with the cleats, I decided to make a wooden frame around each outlet. So I traced an electrical box and cut it out with my jigsaw. After I replaced white outlets with brown outlets, I added the wood frame and an electrical box extender. I followed all that up by adding a brown cover to match the outlet. After adding all of the outlet frames, now I was able to cut the cleats to size and butt them up against each frame, as this made a nice seamless transition. Now it was time to get back to adding the cleats to the wall, so I continued on with my leveling screws by just stacking these up one after another. I began to get into a nice rhythm, and before I knew it, I was finished. And I couldn't be any happier with the way this turned out. Now that the French cleats are on the wall, I needed to make some hangers for my tools. By doing that, I used the same 3/4 inch plywood and some wood dowels. I began laying out some tools and cut out a piece for each one to have its own hanger. To hold the tools in place, I just found a couple of spots for the dowels that would best support each one. Then I drilled some holes at a slight angle so the tools won't be able to slide off of the dowels. Then I got the length I needed for the dowels and cut those to size and followed that by inserting them into the angled holes. And then I admire my drill sitting nicely on the hanger. Now for my hanger to sit on the wall, I needed to add a French cleat on the back. So I applied glue and placed the hanger where I wanted it, and then I applied a few brad nails. I repeated this process with each tool I wanted to hang on the wall and got creative with it. Here you can watch how I made my hanger for the router. Now don't overthink or overbuild these hangers. The dowels are strong enough for battery-powered tools as most of them weigh less than 10 pounds. And the dowels are inexpensive and available at any hardware store. Since I am hanging all of my battery-powered tools, I needed to make a charging station. I laid out all of my chargers and cut this piece to size. I then measured out the screw mount holes on the back of the chargers and then transferred those measurements to the plywood. I then followed that by adding the screws. Now I wanted to add a shelf to this charging station. So I clamped a spacer piece to the top and fastened the shelf with glue and brad nails. Now I needed to find a place to store my batteries, and I found these inexpensive battery holders on Amazon and decided to install them on the bottom of the shelf. I just eyeballed the spacing and applied the screws. The last thing to do was to add the French cleat on the back with glue and brad nails. Now that I was able to hang it on the wall, I started loading it down with my chargers and my batteries. Now I needed to make some wood clamp racks. So I began marking out where I needed each slot. And then I drilled holes at the end point of those slots. I followed that by using my jigsaw to remove the remaining material. With glue and nails, I fastened this to the top of another piece of plywood. And since this will be holding quite a bit of weight, I added a few screws along with a corner support on each end with brad nails. I then finished it off by adding a cleat with glue and screws. And as you can see, this is plenty strong enough to hold all of the clamps, and I made 3 more to provide room for the rest of them. After making all of the tool hangers, I stained and finished them the same way I did with the wall cleats. This wall will provide plenty of storage for easy grab-and-go tools. The nice thing about this type of wall is that I can place each hanger anywhere on the wall within a matter of seconds, so the arrangement possibilities are endless. And if you are interested in any of the tools or supplies that I used in this video, I will leave a link for those in the description below. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video, and before you go, I'd like to share some scripture with you coming from Paul in his letter to the Romans. And this is chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. And Paul says here, "For I am not ashamed of this good news about Christ. It is the power of God at work, saving everyone who believes, the Jew first and also the Gentile. This good news tells us how God makes us right in His sight. This is accomplished from start to finish by faith. As Scripture says in Habakkuk chapter 2 verses 4, it is through faith that a righteous person has life." Thanks again for watching.